looks like Arknights Enfield developers have been working pretty hard to give us some more information on the Arknights Enfield and what we can kind of expect this year. So based on this little interview by Xputer, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, they kind of went back and forth with hypergryph and talked about a lot of different things like the tech test, what they kind of plan to release on, and what we can kind of expect of this year. So this first little line of paragraphs here is just basically introducing hypergryph. If you don't know, they make X asterisk. They also make Arknights Enfield, which is going to be the game we're talking about in this little article. They just got done with their tech test, which we were a part of. So I'll have some insight on kind of like what I thought about it as we work through here. But yeah, so the first one here is basically just talking about how it was early development in 2021, which I didn't even know that. I thought it was like 2023 or something that they kind of worked on, or 2022. So it's kind of interesting to see just how long this game's been kind of worked on. But it's just kind of like, hey, how has it changed over the years? And this first one is pretty simplistic, so I'll just kind of skim over it. There's a couple of questions I really want to dive into. But this one kind of just talks about, you know, different camera angles, some of the combat gameplay. They worked on some of their combat and their art assets to give us a little bit more of an immersive experience, because they're kind of working on making a little bit closer view of those characters. So obviously they got to refine their art assets to make sure that makes sense. And then they kind of went into world building, making these barren landscapes into a little bit more dangerous yet beautiful wildernesses filled with engaging mysteries and unknown threats, just making it a little bit more lively, of course. And then they just added some different RPG elements as well as some management sims, which obviously was part of the factory thing, which I really enjoyed. I ended up playing for like an hour and a half just doing that on stream, and I got totally lost in it. So it was a lot of fun for me, and it was something that I didn't even think I was going to care about until I started doing it. But the other thing is just basically giving a lot of freedom and how to do automate, you know, their production lines and stuff like that. So a lot of just like nitty gritty different changes that they made over the last couple of years to make it a little bit more free flow, and what we got to see in the tech test. Basically, the next question talks about how Arknights, the original, was a popular video game, but will Enfield be of similar size or perhaps even bigger in terms of scope and overall content? Enfield will be a larger game with all the new graphics and gameplay system. The story of Enfield takes place in another world. We thus hope that the Enfield experience feels connected to Arknights in style while offering completely new content. Our aim is to realize the fullest potential of 3D games. So we definitely saw that. We had like kind of subtle, like, you know, connections between Arknights and Enfield, but it was kind of trying to do its own thing, and obviously taking place in a 3D world versus kind of like the chibi tower defense stuff that we get in Arknights was definitely a new like on taking for hypergryph. They're obviously working through it and kind of getting a little bit more experience with it. But honestly, I think the tech test was pretty good, and it had a lot of cool feedback, which we talk about here in a little bit in this article, how they kind of received that feedback and what they're planning to do with it. Next question here is pretty interesting. Should players play the original game before jumping into this, or could it be completely separate? It's always a nice thing to kind of tell people, like, do you need to get into Arknights and play all that stuff, or can you jump straight into Enfield? Looks like they're hoping to make this fully accessible and enjoyable by new players without having to know everything about Arknights. So kind of a limited, you know, scope of knowledge there. You should be able to be pretty fine in Enfield and understand kind of what's going on. But of course, we're fully aware that Arknights has created a very engaging world. Enfield will be continuation of this grand universe in another place. We know that many Arknights fans, myself included, want to see stories and world building elements from Arknights continue into Enfield. I think they did a nice kind of, you know, gapping of that with the gravestones and stuff like that we got to see in the tech test. Or the Patriot statue as well. But just kind of a nice little teaser for us who are Arknights fan to give us like, oh, that's so cool that he's here, or that this name's here, or whatever. But also, like, if you don't know who that is, it's not like the end of the world. It's not like you're like, who the hell? Now I missed out on so much lore. I mean, technically you did, but it doesn't really change basically what's happening. You can still kind of learn what Rose Island is, kind of what they're doing and how they're working on the new planet without having to know exactly what they were doing in Terra and getting an idea of that. So obviously the connection is there, but it doesn't make it like you have to know it or you're totally screwed. Those experienced Arknights would notice certain elements of the Arknight saga in Enfield, which is literally what I just said. Key events and individuals at Arknights are also instrumental in determining the course. The Enfield story takes place in the future. Change the lives of the people in the Enfield story were only achieved through the hard work of the Doctor, us, the operators of the Rhodes Island, and various figures of Terra, which is all the people that we got to see, Ace, my boy, on the gravestone tomb. So yeah, pretty much just like what I said. It's just a nice little connection. Next one here is both the original game and Enfield have some degree of connection. Can you tell us what extent we may see overlap of both stories and overall world? So people of Talos descended from the Terrans who ventured to the new world. The story of Endfield also takes place in the distant future after the Arknight story. Orgenium and the infected people afflicted with orpathy for major issues in Terra, the world of Arknights. Although those problems have not been completely resolved in Talos 2, they're no longer the most pressing concerns in the new world. However, the Talosans, I don't know how to say it, must stand united once more to fight against new threats only found on Talos 2. So we saw that because orpathy was a concern. You know, obviously we had stuff to kind of treat it. We had a couple story missions where, without going too much into spoiler territory, somebody was affected with it. We're able to kind of mitigate some of the effects of it and kind of give them, like, I don't want to say a normal life, but a kind of normal life. You know what I mean? Like, they'll have to take medicine over time and kind of always be on that to kind of deal with what they were dealing with, but they weren't getting completely rid of it. But it also wasn't like this huge thing that was overtaking the population and there was nothing they could do about it. So they have different kind of issues that they have to fight. We didn't get too much of that information except for like the blight, which they didn't really touch on too much in the tech test, which obviously is going to be more of a story thing as they develop the story. But it's really interesting to see, like, they're kind of like, hey, Orgenium and Orpathy is still here, but it's not like the most pressing concerns that we got. We got a little bit of a way to kind of suppress that stuff without completely getting rid of it. Rhodes Island and Enfield Industries are both organizations found in Terra. Rhodes Island will continue to be an active player in the story, provide support to the protagonist in Talos 2. They will be a very important ally to overcome the enemies that we must fight in the new world. Of course, that is true as well. We were looking for Rhodes Island, we're looking for Angelina, and we're kind of trying to rendezvous with them to kind of get an idea of what we should do next, and kind of working with them in the Enfield Industries to kind of like collaboratively do stuff to, kind of deal with the pressing matters in the Enfield story. Like I said, it was a tech test, so we didn't get too much of a deep dive into everything the story had to do and, kind of the big idea of the overall world. So we'll definitely have to dive more into that as we get more closed betas and obviously on release. Next one is going to be any fan requested features you are still working on or aren't considering despite being heavily requested. This one's a very interesting one. This is basically like the feedback that they got from the tech test. So players exceeded our expectations when they expressed great enthusiasm in the factory automation and simulation of the Infield. This is, like I said, bro, I didn't think I was going to like it. I went in, I was like, hey, this is actually kind of fun. And I enjoyed the hell out of it so much that I sat there for like an hour and a half making different things like perfectly work. And I only got like the bare minimum stuff. Like, I can imagine how crazy this stuff can get. So they also want the factory game to be more convenient. So that's definitely on the top of our list. We want this hardcore yet additive gameplay to be accessible as possible to everyone to enjoy the future of setting up their production lines. They also adjusted basic movements and attack animations. Characters in the game will move more smoothly and battles will be more exciting and intense. So this last little line is basically my biggest criticism, is the fighting and combat felt a little stiff. It definitely felt a little weird because a lot of it was just kind of like you're waiting for the parry to break the guard and you're using skills to help break the guard meter. And that's basically it. So like basic attacks felt like they had no real impact on anything, just kind of just chip damage. And mostly you're just kind of running back, doing a skill, running back, doing a skill, waiting for like their little, parry animation thing to do your skill. So you always had to have one in the tank waiting. So you're just kind of doing this awkward kind of like running around the enemy. And it wasn't a ton of fun and it wasn't really that immersive for me. So I'm hoping by, saying more smoothly and battles being more exciting and intense, that means like we can actually do a couple more different things. Maybe it's a little bit more engaging. Maybe our basic attacks do something. I don't know. Whatever they got cooking, I'm sure they'll take the feedback and kind of run with it. They're really good at doing stuff like that. So I have full faith that they, got a good idea of what they need to fix. So are you considering on covering Xbox on release? If not, could you tell us why? So this is another very interesting point for you guys. We hope users of every leading platform can play Enfield on their platform of choice, anytime, anywhere. We definitely want to leverage the advantages of consoles, PCs, and mobile devices. This is why we're trying to cover as many platforms as possible. Of course, this will entail quite a lot of work from our development team, but we're also very prepared to meet this challenge. So this doesn't confirm that it will be on Xbox, but it kind of looks like maybe they're talking to them or maybe trying to get some sort of deal negotiated. I don't know what happened and why Genshin kind of set the precipice of only working with Sony and PlayStation. I don't know if it's because Xbox jumped out of a deal. I don't know how that all entailed, but basically that's been the leading kind of, everybody does that. Honkai Star Rail did that. And now it looked like, Hypergryph and Endfield was going to do that because they gave us a nice announcement for PC and mobile as well as PlayStation 5 at the end of this trailer. But it kind of looks like maybe they're working with Xbox or maybe talking to them at least to see if they can't negotiate some sort of deal. But I thought it was kind of interesting that they mentioned that. And it was funny that they even got pressed on that to kind of see what they were doing. But I think they answered it pretty well. So it's kind of not up to them necessarily, but they're kind of working to, take that challenge if, they can, basically. So hopefully the Xbox peeps will get a little bit of love too. I feel like they've been left out of a lot of these games. So do you have plans to make open or closed beta tests before the game releases? This is probably why most of you clicked on this video. We just concluded the first round of testing with our players and we'll be working on adjusting and optimizing the content. Once various preparations are done, our players will definitely get to see more of the game this year. So Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be a closed beta. It could be a teaser, it could be another trailer, it could just be more information on what they're doing. So it doesn't necessarily mean a closed beta, but I honestly think the tech test was a little further along than a lot of people recognize. And I do think it ran really, really well. Based on the feedback, obviously they have a couple adjustments that they need to make. So it could be, you know, I don't know, Q3 or Q4 this year, maybe we get another closed beta test. But the fact of the matter is a tech test is basically a little bit more than an alpha, but not quite a beta. So I think they were kind of just getting an idea of like what the look and feel of this game was going to be and how they kind of, you know, players interacted with different things so they can maybe move it into the closed beta state. And then they're going to have a, you know, closed beta for a lot of different people and have like some of the various feedback and stuff like that adjusted and then go from there. So it's kind of an interesting point that they kind of mentioned that they will definitely get something this year. But like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be a closed beta, but we're definitely going to see something. At least some news is better than no news and waiting a year and a half or whatever and sitting there, you know, not knowing anything. Could you tell us more about the graphic modes and the team aiming for it? So basically, this is a nice one. It's just 4K, 60 FPS. You can choose your graphics and frame rate. You also get ray tracing and HDR. There's a lot of different customization, not too much in the tech test, but you could do a couple different things on PC. Obviously, it's the only one that I played on. So ray tracing is pretty cool for anybody who likes that kind of stuff. I personally never play it because I stream, so like I can't really give up the performance of streaming to do that kind of stuff, but it's cool. It's always kind of cool to see the different reflections and all that different stuff. And just the fact that you can prioritize graphics and frame rate does make sense, especially on PlayStation 5 as well as PC, because PC you always kind of get those options, but PlayStation 5 has been pretty good at giving you different options and stuff like that. So is there anything else you want to share, something we haven't touched on? This is kind of nice, you know, honestly, this is kind of cool because they're just kind of thanking everybody for the opportunity, for their support. Arknights Enfield teams are doing everything they can to create a unique universe. I think that they're flying out of the park with the unique universe stuff. Arknights is probably one of the most unique stuff that I've ever read. And honestly, I think they're going to crush it with Endfield as well. Even though we only got like a kind of smidgen of what the tech test could bring, I definitely know that they're cooking something. So they also got some different things that, you know, making it unique can be extremely difficult. They've come up with a special way to blend some different gameplay and stuff like that. And hopefully it can excite us as well as them. And they're developing such a massive scale for the first time. So be patient is basically what they're talking with. You know, they came into a lot of problems, but we've managed to say that we've solved most of them. So it's kind of nice to see that, you know, basically maybe this is kind of based on feedback, or maybe some of the different things they were going into like this huge universe and 3D and all that different stuff. It looks like they were able to run through a lot of different things and really kind of manage on solving it, which is really cool. So we hope our doctors and administrators will continue to press forward and remain in this epic adventure. Use your creativity to be challenges, solve mysteries, and help more people is our sincere wish that we can work, see worlds of Terra and Talos to be happy or have a happy future. Well, the one thing I got to say to that is we know he ain't gonna be happy, bro. If it's anything like any of the other stories I've ever read in Arknight, they ain't gonna end up happy. But we'll be happy playing because we'll all be crying and sharing this stuff together. So I thought this would be interesting. Let me know what you guys think about this article and stuff like that. Or the format of these videos. It's kind of fun to read this stuff and stuff.